Oh, yeah. Yo, let's do this.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first X Cultural. This is a podcast webcast that I'm very excited to be hosting. My name is Michael Asquith. I am Senior Executive Global Solutions at Vistatec. Vistatec is a global content solutions provider to some of the most iconic and innovative brands in the world. You can check out more at www.vistatec.com. This first episode will be focused on Major League Baseball, the MLB World Series, and this will be a bilingual edition with a little bit of Spanglish mixed in. We will also be talking about how global baseball actually is as a sport. We'll make the connection to business and to passion and to cross-cultural communications, the many dimensions of culture in general. We'll talk about transcreation, translation, localization, and many other related subjects to global business. So my first guest, which I'm very excited to have and very appreciative to have here today, is Zach Haitkin, who is localization manager at Lyft. For those of you outside of the Americas, Lyft is a ride-sharing platform, also a bike-sharing platform, and now has delved a bit deeper into food delivery services as well with the recent partnership with Grubhub. It's wonderful to have Zach here today, but first I think it's really important to give a little bit of backstory. So first of all, welcome from Chicago. My virtual background here is of Wrigley Field. I'm a huge Chicago Cubs fan. And Zach, I was listening to a podcast not too long ago where he specifically talked about his passion with baseball. The podcast itself was about localization, but I found it amazing that and very bold that Zach had actually hosted sports podcasts focused on baseball that were purely in Spanish back in his college days. And so I thought that his story and how he was a Lyft driver, a multilingual Lyft driver, and how he went from being a Lyft driver to being the localization manager at Lyft was a truly compelling story. And I'm very excited to have him here and to have it be that two gentlemen sharing their passions about these subjects and very much look forward to the feedback, etc. So without further ado, I want to introduce my first guest here, Zach Hyken. Thanks, Zach, for being here.
Thank you for the introduction, Michael. I appreciate it. So yeah, I'm the localization manager at Lyft. I've been there 6.5 years. I've held different roles in customer support, in operations, competitive intelligence, and now localization for the last couple of years. I actually started as a driver, Lyft driver, about 7.5 years ago, and was able to make my way into the headquarters there. But yeah, so I live in San Francisco now, but I grew up in Los Angeles. So if you cut open my veins, my blood is blue, and there's nothing that'll ever change that. So being here in the Bay Area is a little bit tough behind enemy lines, but my philosophy has always been I've always been a more of a root for my own team rather than talk smack about the other team. So sure. Even with the rivalry being one of the longest, most intense, and one of the oldest in sports. I mean, you go back to both teams being in New York from the beginning of the 20th century. It's the rivalry is deep. But yeah, so while I was finishing my undergrad in Spanish language, I was living abroad in Oaxaca. And I quickly found out that there's a baseball team down in Mexico. And Mexico is an interesting country because I think you can divide the Latin American countries. Are they a soccer country or are they a baseball country? So you've got Argentina and Chile. They are soccer countries, but then you've got Dominican Republic, Cuba, Venezuela, Colombia. Colombia's more of a mix, but yeah, they're baseball countries. So, and Mexico's kind of both. There's a huge baseball following as well as soccer. So, the town I was staying in, Oaxaca, in the southern part of Mexico, was all about baseball. And I'm actually wearing one of the jerseys right now. I don't know if you can see, but this is the local team, Los Guerreros de Oaxaca. And so I ended up going to quite a few games, probably about a dozen games, and just really solidified my love for baseball, not only Dodgers, but now have a connection to a Mexican team. So when I came back, I was like, well, how do I combine my love for language and my love for baseball? And that lent itself to 19 episodes of a podcast talking about asuntos latinoamericanos que tienen que ver con béisbol. So I felt like it was a good mix. And actually, I didn't have anybody helping me on the podcast. I did it all by myself. Wrote, produced, recorded, edited, did it all. Audacity is a wonderful program for editing podcasts.
Yes.
But yeah, it was a good experience.
Zach, and definitely I want you to talk, maybe to kind of say some of your story kind of in Spanish, as much as you feel like, but I also thought too, you kind of told this story specifically about like a big win that happened to you while you were were able to stay abroad or go through kind of that experience in Mexico. Maybe you could kind of tell us a little bit about that experience and that passion that you got to see firsthand when you were in Mexico.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the Guerreros were doing well in the regular season. They ended up making it to the playoffs. And we'll get into it a little bit about transcreation and vocabulary in Spanish. But even in baseball, they actually use the English word for los playoffs. Los Guerreros pasaron a los playoffs. So they were in the postseason. And it was the equivalent of the divisional series. And instead of being 3 out of 5, it was 4 out of 7. And it was an incredible game. I ended up sitting in the bleachers for a couple of the games, including Game 7, and they walked it off. Ganaron en la última entrada, los Guerreros. I'm trying to remember who it was. I want to say it was Los Tigres de Quintana Roo, which is another team on the Yucatan Peninsula. But yeah, that was a pretty amazing experience, just being there for that. And the stadium's not large, maybe 8,000 people, but being there was pretty incredible. Y para decir un poco en español, estando allá en el estadio durante este partido, fue completamente increíble. No puedo decir otra cosa. Primero que nada, el equipo y la experiencia de Oaxaca, los Guerreros, es increíble. Es distinto. Creo que hay más ánimo para la gente, porque en verdad quieren mucho al equipo, los Guerreros. La gente quiere mucho a los Guerreros. Y creo que, bueno, para mí, como extranjero allá en México, yo me convertí como en parte de la afición de los Guerreros y me sentí como era mi equipo. Y ahora yo tengo 2 equipos, los Dodgers de Los Ángeles y los Guerreros de Oaxaca. But yeah, it was amazing, and I'll never forget it.
I just nod my head and smile, right? So yes, and I really do appreciate Zach is tasked with speaking both English and Spanish today. I have the easy job of just speaking English and talking culture and the globalness of MLB. So. But that I think is an amazing experience that you had is, specifically in Mexico. What kind of where did this passion for baseball come from? Is this, for me personally, I went to games with my father at Wrigley Field since I was 1 year old. I'm Canadian American and been in Chicago my whole life. And so, my dad always tells this story that I was at Wrigley Field and I'd be 1 and had a smile on my face, So I was blessed and cursed from birth being a Chicago Cubs fan. But Zach, tell us, I'm very interested, where does that passion come from? I know how emotional, with the Dodgers, as we were talking before, you are about them playing tonight. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I've always played baseball. I started playing when I was 5, and so I played all the way through college, not NCAA, but club baseball in college. So I feel like because I was always playing and typically was one of the better players on the team, that I sort of just gravitated towards baseball. Then I met a friend of mine who was. His parents were a season ticket holder when I was 12. And so we would go to quite a few games. I'd say 15, 20 games for several years of my childhood. So he had very good seats in the dugout club for quite a while. So definitely got a chance to be really close to the action. And I think just that prolonged exposure to the Dodgers at such a close range, meeting players sometimes, getting autographs. That was pretty. It made a big impression on me. So the other cool thing too is I actually went to a baseball camp hosted by Reggie Smith Baseball Academy, which is in the San Fernando Valley, Encino, in Los Angeles. I think it's still there. It may have moved, but that's where it was when I went. Then I actually became a counselor. And so Reggie Smith and my friend's family are good friends. They stay in touch even to this day. So having a chance to meet a Dodger legend like Reggie Smith was definitely something that will always be close. It'll always definitely keep the Dodgers in my heart as long as I'm alive.
Did you have a lot of Latin American, Spanish speaking players that you played with back then?
Not really.
Not so much.
Yeah, not so much playing with. There was definitely a few that I remember, but not that many growing up. When I played in college, there was a handful. I remember there was a guy who I went to college with, Omar Garcia, who was from Mexico, and he was definitely a great player and someone I enjoyed playing with. But yeah.
No, that's awesome. I miss those days, and I think as you know, one of the great things about the game is it's where you get to kind of remember being a kid again. I played baseball myself as a kid, and I wasn't as good as you sounded, but I was scrappy, and I played second base and loved it, and played leading up to high school, and then I wasn't very disciplined with the sports stuff once I reached high school. But no, I think that's incredible, Zach. So tell us a little bit. You know, obviously you go through an emotional roller coaster like I do with games. It sounds, and I can definitely relate with that. My days used to be basically how my mood was whether or not the Cubs won, and back then the Cubs were particularly bad, so you can imagine how my mood swings were. But how are you feeling? Obviously, you guys had a huge win. You're a huge Dodgers fan. We had the NLCS just wrap up. Went to Game 7. The ALCS, the American League Championship Series, also went to Game 7. So tell us a little bit how you're feeling, you know, after a Game 7 win, coming back from 3-1, right? 3-1?
3-1 and 2-0. Yeah. So, no, this is not a secret, no surprise. The two best words in sports are Game 7. So certainly really enjoyed watching the Dodgers pull it out, especially in such dramatic fashion, with a come from behind tying home run from Kike Hernandez, amazing Puerto Rican player, and then from Cody Bellinger to go ahead. And I don't know if you've seen the video of that home run. He's certainly he milks it. That bat flip was he did a good job. And you know what? He deserved it. I mean, that was a moonshot. That was a bomb. That was a no doubter to put them ahead. So feeling very, very thankful, very happy that they were able to pull it off. Was quite nervous and kind of counting them out a little bit after going down 2-0 and then 3-1. But you know what? The team is so good. Their lineup is pretty incredible. They had the best run differential during the regular season. They had the best pitching during the regular season. So I think top to bottom, they are the best team in baseball. So, I'll do myself a favor and not count them out, but I'm very much looking forward to it. We've got the 2 top seeds though. I would not count the Rays out. They have a very good team. While their offense isn't quite as potent, their pitching is very, very good. And I think the old adage, good pitching beats good hitting, could definitely apply here. So I am, as usual, a nervous wreck and will continue to be until it's over. But very much looking forward to seeing the matchup between the 2 best teams in baseball right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I don't know if you want to maybe take some time to just kind of articulate what you just said in Spanish, but I think that would be fantastic as well.
Bueno, estoy bien entusiasmado para ver la serie mundial entre los Rays de Tampa Bay y los Dodgers de Los Ángeles. Será una gran serie entre los 2 equipos que son los titanes de las mayores en este momento. Bueno, los Dodgers obviamente tienen una alineación muy buena en términos de producción ofensiva y creo que será un poco difícil porque los Rays de Tampa Bay también tienen unas lanzadores que pueden, ¿cómo lo digo en español? Pueden lanzar muy bien contra una alineación y tratar de neutralizar los bates de los Dodgers, pero veremos. Como ya mencioné, será una gran serie entre los 2 mejores equipos, pero en mi opinión, los Dodgers van a ganar, pero veremos. No quiero predecir nada, pero espero que ganen los Dodgers.
See. So no, I think that's fantastic. Yeah, and some of those storylines I think during the NLCS and ALCS were really fantastic. Dusty Baker being manager of Houston, so it was the Houston Astros against the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. For especially my European colleagues, was in the ALCS. So I thought the storyline with Dusty Baker, who's been a manager and is and he's in his 70s. Has been a manager for God knows how long at this point. Used to be even a Chicago Cubs manager back in 2003 with the famous Bartman situation with Mark Pryor on the mound. So he, I was kind of pulling for him. But other than him, I was not pulling for the Houston Astros, especially with the cheating scandal that went on with the sign stealing last year, and maybe years prior to. Actually, it was about the 2017 series against the Dodgers. How we really never talked about this, but I'm sure that LA was particularly angry about the cheating scandal with Houston Astros. How much of you was wanting the matchup to be the Houston Astros, just so that you could kind of put them in their place, so to speak?
That's a very interesting question, and I appreciate you asking that, because it's kind of do you want the team that cheated, and I'll say it, to make it so that you can beat them and have some closure there, or do you want them to not even have the chance to make it to the World Series and have them fall short and say, like, boy, they were so close. It's almost like they were missing one thing in order to make it to the next level. I wonder what that thing could be. Certainly a push and pull between the two. If I had to, I honestly think, without a doubt, the Astros have an extremely talented team. They're very good, extremely good. Oh, yeah. And so I would venture to say I'd rather have them not make it. I'd rather have them fall short, even without, because I guess that's more of like risk aversion. Because what if they do make it, and what if they win again? Then that would be even worse. That would be even worse, I think. So I would say I'd rather have them fall short and have them thinking about how they couldn't get over that hump Yeah, I'll give them a small amount of credit. No, actually, no, I'm not. Coming back from
that's what the response I was looking for. But yes, I like that you got to the raw response there. And I couldn't agree with you more. Like, I wouldn't want them to make it, because to me that validates that they're good enough to make it without cheating. And I think in baseball, you and I both probably are aware of the baseball gods that they all talk about in those types of scenarios and situations. And so I think karma there was definitely a player. And so, yeah, I'm very happy to see that the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, or Rays, I'm sorry, it's just Tampa Bay Rays now.
It's the Rays.
Yes, are now playing your Los Angeles Dodgers. I think it'll be really, really exciting. And I'm actually pulling for the Dodgers, which is very strange for me, because obviously we met in the 2016 playoffs and also in the 2017 playoffs. So we won in 16, and you guys won in 17. So I look forward to that, hopefully being a trend in the future as well. But yeah, did you have any other thoughts about the NLCS? I know, there were some fun things like the Altuve. You and I talked a little bit about this, about something called the Yips. And I thought this was hilarious because, I'm, know about baseball, and there's a lot of superstition in baseball. And then Altuve, who's a very good player, who's won MVP. He's about 5'6", so I'm about the same height. So I particularly used to be fond of him before he cheated. But yeah, him having some of that karma happen in his defense, where he couldn't throw the ball for, I think, 3 or 4 different plays, I thought was kind of interesting. But obviously there were some positive things that were crazy, and you'd probably be able to pronounce his name better, and I've been trying to pronounce his name. But on the Tampa Bay side, the great story about Randy, or how do you say his last name? Randy or
Arozarena.
Much better than my pronunciation. So yeah, tell me more about the NLCS and the ALCS.
Sure. So yeah, the Yips is something that it's interesting, because you look at baseball just in general in terms of a sport, and there's no other sport that I'm aware of where there's more games played over the course of a regular season. So it's very much a game of averages and a game of muscle memory, because you do the same thing over and over again. So when you start to see someone like Altuve, who is typically extremely solid in the field, make 3 throwing errors in the course of a few games, I don't think he's ever done that in his entire career. That's not a physical thing. There's nothing physically wrong with him. He's not hurt. If he were hurt, he probably wouldn't be playing, or he'd come out and say he was hurt. So it has nothing to do with his physicality. It has everything to do with his mentalidad, with his head. So he I don't think you see that much in other sports besides baseball. So I don't want to say I'm happy to see that, but I certainly wasn't unhappy to see that he was having some difficulty.
It was kind of funny too to see the gas,
right? Exactly.
And so yeah, how would you transcreate Yips? I was thinking about that yesterday. I'm like, how would one transcreate Yips in Spanish? That would probably have to be a paragraph long.
That's a good question, and that's definitely a tough one for me as a non-native speaker who is fluent, who studied it in college. Transcreation is something that takes a little bit longer for me, because I have to do more research. I don't have the same type of cultural understanding.
Sure,
you might have to come back to me on that one. Where it's I don't know. I might say something like problema mental, like a mental problem, but that doesn't really describe exactly what this is. Dificultad mental, dificultad, some kind of mental difficulty, but that doesn't really describe it in terms of the specificity of
it's like mental difficulty maybe causing physical something.
Yeah,
I don't know what that would be. It would have to be like some kind of, and I don't know how you capture that in 1 or 2 words.
That's a really, really tough one, but I'll take that on as a challenge. I'll take that on as a challenge and see if I can get back to you with that one.
Yeah, definitely. That would be great. I'd be very interested in hearing how that would come across, for sure. I think it's a little probably easier if you're talking about it in like a publication or some kind of article versus if it was in some kind of user interface, obviously, where you have, length restrictions and things of that nature. So no, I think that's particularly awesome. And then, yeah, I thought some of the other cool stories there was, getting back to Tampa was the Randy, and say his last name again for us.
Rosarena.
Thank you, Alcerena. So, who's a 25-year-old Cuban player, who was drafted actually by the St. Louis Cardinals, and then fortunately, fortunately I say because I'm a Chicago Cubs fan, very happy to see that he was traded away from a team that is my team's rival, from the St. Louis Cardinals to the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, and he has been unbelievable. I think he's had 6 or 7 home runs in the playoffs so far. So quite a story there.
Yeah, I love seeing that that a young player really steps up and takes the reins here. I think you saw it last year with Juan Soto, who's even younger. I don't think he was either 20 or 21 when he had that hit against the Brewers. Remember? I don't know if you remember that in the
wild card.
But he continued to perform really well throughout the playoffs, and now you have Randy Arozarena that's doing the kind of the same thing, but quite a few more home runs. Corey Seager also, NLCS MVP,
yes.
had 5 home runs, 11 RBIs throughout the entire series. But no, and particularly the fact that he's Cuban, he emigrated here to the United States. It's actually kind of an interesting story, and his story is not unique, unfortunately, of having difficulty getting here to the United States and feeling kind of a disconnection with Cuba, in terms of not feeling like the country. He doesn't necessarily want to support him. And I was just reading an article about how if he were to play for a national team, he'd want to play for Mexico rather than Cuba, because he felt like he doesn't want to support Cuba until things really change there. And this is a much longer conversation than we have for today, but let's just say that the Cuban and the history between Cuba and the United States is long and complicated. And on the baseball side, you see stories like Yasiel Puig and Aroldis Chapman, who also have come. But you've definitely seen more of an influx to the United States in Cuban baseball players, I think, since Fidel Castro died and his brother took over. So there is a softening there, but I do think that there's still some difficulty that players have looking at their home country. So I love seeing stories like this. I love seeing players like him have success, and hopefully it doesn't continue in the World Series, but I wish him the best in the rest of his career.
No, absolutely. And I think that's a good segue to kind of like the next kind of topic that I thought would be interesting and very relevant, especially as it relates to culture, with Latin America and Asia. And, one of the things that I mentioned before is, baseball, MLB used to be called, or it still is called, America's pastime, right? But is it really more of a global sport these days? And you and I kind of talked a little bit about this offline, but maybe you could talk a little bit, or we can obviously talk a little bit more about Latin America, the Asia crossovers, the different leagues. Obviously, there's leagues in Latin America, and then in Asia, there's the KBO, the Korean Baseball Organization, and then there's the I always mess up the Nippon. Is it Nippon? I believe that's how you pronounce it, professional baseball. So the NPB in Japan. So we were talking a little bit about differences, between how cultures interpret the sport and, maybe differences in the game itself. But, maybe did you have kind of any thoughts, like as far as, you brought up like Fidel Castro and him hit the death and that situation kind of spurring on more, I guess, openness with baseball in some cases. And now, of course, Cuban players don't have to defect like they used to have to in order to join MLB. But Yeah, I think it was a really interesting kind of history that things kind of changed about 10 years ago or so.
Yeah, I will definitely say that baseball is a global sport. It is America's pastime. Going back to the 1860s, 1870s when you first saw it out here, and then spreading throughout the rest of the world. A lot of it through military bases, from what I understand, particularly in Latin America or in the Caribbean and in Japan. The American military would play on base, and they would bring the sport over to that country. But yeah, you see not just an influx of players coming from those other countries to MLB, but also the other way around. There's quite a few Americans that play in the KBO and in Japan. And I think that's really cool. The contracts are probably not as big, but at the same time, if you've got players that love baseball and want to continue to play, then they'll go there. Focusing more on Latin America, you see a lot of leagues that are played in the wintertime. And it kind of makes sense if you think about the weather. In the summer, it rains a lot. A lot of these stadiums aren't covered. It's extremely hot in the summer. So playing in the wintertime just makes a lot more sense. So you see winter leagues in Puerto Rico, in Venezuela, in the Dominican Republic, where players who are professional players here in the U.S. will go down there and play in the winter league along with people that live there. But yeah, one exception though is the Liga Mexicana de Béisbol, which is the Mexican baseball league. They'll play in the summer, and they're actually affiliated with Major League Baseball. They're technically part of the minor league system. So you'll see them play in conjunction during the not this year because of COVID, but they'll play at the same time as the major leagues. But no, I think the amount of attention that gets paid to baseball in Latin America is pretty incredible. These numbers are a little bit old, but I think it's probably even more so these days. Is 25% of major league rosters are Latin American born players, and about half of minor league baseball are born in Latin America. And this is not players of Latin American descent. These are people that were born in other countries in Latin America. So I think that just goes to show you the amount of influence that baseball has had on that in that part of the world.
I was surprised. I was surprised when you told me, about Brazil, and it being popular there. It was one thing I, started looking at because I didn't even realize that too. And obviously Argentina, Venezuela, Colombia, those are big markets, and Mexico, of course, in Latin America as well. So no, I think that's really cool. Didn't mean to kind of interrupt you there, but yeah, no, I think it's, I think what's also cool is just the opportunities that it provides. And also, I'm curious though, MLB is still in Latin America. Is that still probably what they watched primarily, or are they still just more passionate about their own leagues? I know with the Asian baseball leagues, both in Japan and Korea, they're following kind of both. They like to see their players go over to Major League Baseball. And then obviously some American players also have gone over, like we've talked about, with extending their careers, like, Andrew Jones and, Addison Russell from the Cubs that used to be on the Cubs, who had some problems, personal problems, and ended up trying to extend his career overseas. Do you see differences, I guess, in the passion? And also back to the question of just, do they follow their own leagues more so than Major League Baseball?
Well, I think it's tough to say whether they follow it more or less. I think probably because it's local, certainly have the ability to watch the teams in person more so than here in the United States. But I would say that if there's a player from the country, if someone who watches or attends baseball in Venezuela, who sees players from Venezuela here in the U.S., I think that they would certainly feel a connection there. So they would probably follow certain teams or certain players more. So I think that's what you'll see in terms of the connection with Major League Baseball from people that live in in countries like Dominican Republic, in Cuba, in Venezuela, in Colombia. So I think it's certainly both. If there are baseball fans down there, they'll root for their local team, but then also feel a connection to players that are in the major leagues that are from that country.
No, absolutely. I think too, one of the things that I think is really interesting with MLB becoming more and more global is even with Europe, and specifically them hosting games in London in 2019, the Yankees series against the Red Sox. So the Boston Red Sox against the New York Yankees. And then this year, before COVID hit, it was supposed to be a June game, St. Louis Cardinals against the Chicago Cubs in London as well. So there's definitely a push, I think, from to be, more present in Europe specifically. And I think, they're doing, I think, some more of that too. I remember seeing some games, I think it was last year, the year before, where there was maybe a game in Australia as well. I'm kind of a little foggy, but I thought that that's what they were kind of doing. So maybe they were trying to extend into that kind of market as well, kind of connecting to Asia. So no, I think it's just super, fascinating how baseball is progressing. And as you said, even the players, 50% of the players, being Latin American is pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. And it just shows how diverse the sport is, that there's, a lot of Asia-based players or native Asia-based players. And then there's a lot of, other folks that are starting to kind of trend or kind of leap into the major leagues. I have heard some inklings of, I think we talked about like Dutch players that happen to be from like islands that are part of the Netherlands, et cetera. So,
right.
So no, I think that's super, super fascinating, just to see kind of how that's evolved over time, especially from a cultural standpoint as well. So, and then leading into kind of like the World Baseball Classic. So I don't personally watch it all that much. I've watched it a little bit. I root for my players when they're in it from the Chicago Cubs. So I was pretty fascinated watching Puerto Rico with Javi Baez on the team. But is there a particular team that has like the most Dodgers on it that you're aware of?
Current lineups, I'm not aware. I would say, just based on my experience living in Mexico and following a team in Mexico for a season, I do tend to root for Mexico as well as the United States. But I love seeing, you look at the rosters for Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and Venezuela, and it's a major league roster. There are enough players, enough top tier players from those countries that it looks like an all-star team. Particularly the Dominican Republic. I think they had like David Ortiz and Pedro Martinez, and these are top Hall of Fame players making up the rosters on these countries. But no, I love the World Baseball Classic. I do watch. I kind of equate it to like I watch some soccer, but I really like international soccer. So like World Cup. There's I think it's the Copa de Oro, the Gold Cup, which is teams, international teams in North and South America. I forget exactly which one it is, but anyways, so I really do like the World Baseball Classic. I think it's one of those things where it does kind of feel, they call it the World Series, but it's only teams from the United States, but it's players, but it's players from around the world, and so that's where I feel like you can make the case for it. But seeing all the same players represent their country is pretty amazing. So there's actually a player from Mexico right now, Julio Urias, who had an amazing series, closed it out in Game 7. He's pretty young, but he definitely didn't let that show, and he definitely gave a pretty amazing performance in Game 7. But he's from Mexico. Yep. So he's from Mexico, definitely quickly becoming one of my favorite players. I actually, I got an autograph of his. I didn't get it from him personally. I got it offline, but I had a feeling when I first saw him that he was going to be really good, because he came up pretty early. I think he was only 19, 20 when he first debuted with them. Now, a few years later, he's really showing that he can be that top tier arm out of the bullpen or a starter.
No, I think it's I think he obviously has a ton of talent, and yeah, I watched that game the other night, and for a closer or closer to be kind of thing, Jensen's not the closer still. Then it's him.
So Roberts has said that he's going to go with more of the matchups. That Kenley is going to be. He's not. So to answer your question, no, Kenley is not the ninth inning guy 100% of the time. Is it possible that he would pitch and close out a game if the matchups are right? Absolutely. But I think that's definitely something that the Dodgers are afforded the luxury of being able to go to quite a few different arms in the bullpen, and feel pretty confident about it. So
yeah, I'm wondering how much work you're going to get done this week.
Yeah, probably not that much.
It's always very difficult. I actually think it's hilarious that you said what you said, just because, you know, when the Cubs were in the playoffs and went all the way through the playoffs, the World Series, that October and November was just so amazing. And yes, it was very difficult to stay focused when you're that emotionally invested in a team. So I think that it's completely fascinating. So kind of shifting gears, I just thought that you know, something that was really interesting, that was very natural, like when you and I kind of first started talking, and we talked a lot about, you know, with our localization backgrounds, we started kind of breaking down the, you know, MLB app and the MLB website and the available languages. What is, and we kind of went through a little bit of just the customer kind of user experience there, and then how things are translated specifically for Spanish or transcreated in many cases. Tell us a little bit more. I think it would be really great for the listeners just to kind of give a little bit of a breakdown of how things are kind of localized or translated, you know, on the MLB app for Spanish, some of the creative ways that they're doing that as well. And then, like we talked about, home run and shortstop and some of those key words. But I would love to hear a little bit more about that, you know, especially from a Spanish-English perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as a non-native Spanish speaker, I have to surround myself with Spanish language in order to stay on my game. When I graduated college in 2010, I was, you know, speaking Spanish every day, taking classes, and I studied in Mexico, was feeling really good, but then I didn't keep up with it. So kind of, you know, 4 or 5 years later, I was feeling not as confident in my Spanish. And so I really made an effort to change my phone into Spanish, change my computer into Spanish, change websites into Spanish, and make sure that I was keeping up. And now I've gotten back to a point where I feel a lot more comfortable. So MLB is definitely one where I can consume that content and learn more and enjoy it along the way. So the MLB app is available in Spanish, and so I do use it on a regular basis. And what I really enjoy is a lot of the terms that they use. They tend to, because it's interesting, because baseball has a big influence here in the U.S. You'll see sometimes that words don't get translated; they just end up using the English word. One of my favorite ones actually is in soccer, the referee is called el árbitro. But sometimes they'll use arbitro also to describe an umpire, which sort of serves the same purpose. But I've also seen the use of the word, it's A-M-P-A-Y-E-R, el umpire. And so that's basically an Anglicanism of, you know, the word in English being transliterated, yeah. Right, transliterated into Spanish. And so that's a fun one. But looking at the app, the MLB app, they do a really good job of trying to translate as much as possible. So one, I see a lot of announcers just say shortstop, but the MLB app will say campo corto, which is like, you know, short fielder. One of my favorites is they'll talk about a double play, but they'll call it a doble matanza, which back translates to double kill, which I think is very well described.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But then you'll see ones like words like home run, and typically the more formal term is cuadrangular. But MLB app has it as jonrón, which is completely accepted. And I think, Spanish is spoken in 38 countries around the world. So you'll see a lot of variation in terms of what they call certain terms. But yeah, jonrón for home run is one. Based on balls, base por bolas, but you'll also see pasaporte, passport, transferencia, transfer from home to first. So yeah, there's honestly so much that I can learn from that, and I applaud MLB. They're not perfect, but they're very, very good in comparison to other platforms of really capturing and providing an experience for people that want to consume content in Spanish about baseball. The other one that I remember that I forgot to mention to you the other day is there's a great term for like slugger, toltero, which is this term you'll see sometimes that is baseball specific. But yeah, los tolteros are the players that can really hit the ball out of the park. So it's that's just one of those terms that they've come up with that is baseball specific. You also see pelotero, which is like ball player. Pelota is ball, so pelotero is like ball player, but it's pretty specific to baseball too. So yeah, I could go on and on about.
No, and what I love about it is it's just a great example of how there's style guides and terminology management and all those things are so important, and the fact that they got creative enough to transcreate the contents rather than try to make it too literal, I think is exactly the right approach, especially in this day and age with digital first and being so widespread and everybody very much focused on user experience and customer experience. So I really like that a lot, that MLB has gone to that kind of gone to that extent to make sure that they transcreated these things properly, and then yes, it had me obviously looking at the different languages that they're focused on, and they could probably even up those language pairs, especially as they become more and more kind of global and more audiences are starting to pay attention to MLB. So I think that's really, really cool, and I appreciate you kind of breaking that down as well. Now, how would you say, that does that fair enough kind of relate to kind of Lyft and kind of some of the things that you're currently doing when you go through this process of making sure that it's properly localized into the few languages that Lyft is currently localized into, which I believe is Spanish, Brazilian, Portuguese, and you have one other, French Canadian?
Yes, yeah, that's right. For the app, those are the 3 non-English languages we support, and then for our website, actually, we support 8 languages. So those 3 that you mentioned, and then simplified and traditional Chinese, Russian, Korean, and Vietnamese as well. So I definitely think there are a lot of similarities that you can draw from the transcreation process for baseball terms to Lyft. I think both. I don't want to say companies, but both platforms have certainly a lot of proprietary terms that need to have a lot of attention paid to them. I will say that it's a little bit easier on the Lyft side because we're generating the transcreation for the term, whereas with MLB, because it's been around for so long, these terms have sort of naturally come around. So I think, depending on the country, it's up to MLB to understand the culture, find the term that's used by the most amount of people, and then use that in their Spanish language experience. With Lyft, we get a chance to roll out a brand new product that hasn't existed before, and then come up with something. A good example that I like to use of transcreation is we had there was a program, actually it was in Chicago, where there was a way, if you had a car, you could sell it to Carvana, which is like a used car website.
They have the vending machines, right?
Right. And so there was a program where you say, okay, Carvana, buy my car. and you got like hundreds of dollars in Lyft credit, hundreds of dollars in Lyft bike credit for those divvy bikes that are around town. You got public transit credit, and I think something else as well. But it was a program called Ditch Your Car. Now, ditch your car, that's a tough one because like ditch, we're not talking about like a ditch in the ground. We're talking about ditch as in terms of getting rid of something. So when we went to do it in Spanish, we have an amazing vendor, and our primary Spanish translator is incredible. He and I have a really close relationship. And so I gave this to him and said, hey, what can you come up with? And what he came back with was a few options, but the one that we ended up going with, which was incredible in my opinion, was in Spanish, it's Libertad sobre ruedas, which is liberty or freedom on wheels. Now, if you think about it, the idea is freedom on wheels is like, okay, not only are you getting free from your car, which is the wheels on your car, you're also getting freedom by using the wheels of other vehicles, of bikes, of a train, of a rideshare vehicle. And so that type of attention being paid to a program like this, I just thought that's one of my favorite transcreations that he's ever come up with. So, things like that is the really fun part of localization, in my opinion, and working through things like that. So, I see the creativity, not just in MLB terms, but also in Lyft terms as well. So yeah, that's the fun part. And that's why I love seeing all the different terms that they use. And even, like there's variation among Spanish, like the term for inning, not sometimes announcers will just say inning, but sometimes they'll say episodio for episode, or entrada for inning, or tanda, which also is a term for inning as well. And depending on where the announcer's from, you'll see different terms get used. And for me, it's fascinating. I love it.
Yeah, no, and I find that's really equally fascinating, even though just obviously the business we're both in. But I'm very curious too. Like sometime I'd be curious if you look at the MLB app or the website. Yeah, I haven't looked at it extensively, but if there is kind of a G-local approach in terms of, do they have US Spanish that has a lot of those things not translated, like inning, but then for, in cases where they're particularly focused on, one of the Latin American countries, whether it's Mexico or somewhere else like Venezuela, if they actually are more likely to transcreate that for that target audience. If there is that difference, or if they kind of take it that far or not. But I think, like you said, I think there's a lot of sometimes there's the Spanglish, the kind of mixture in there as well. But yeah, Zach, no, I think it's fantastic. If you don't mind, I would love to have you kind of, as much as you can remember, maybe you could kind of talk a little bit about what you had just said, because I think it's really important for our Spanish-speaking audience to hear a little bit about what you had to say about Lyft's app, and also some of your experiences, but also the one with MLB, and a lot of that I was in Spanish, so I'll leave it to you. Yeah.
Absolutamente, señor. Bueno, creo que la traducción y la transcreación de las plataformas de Lyft y las ligas mayores, se puede ver algunos semejantes entre las dos traducciones. Porque hay términos en béisbol que son únicos al béisbol. Por ejemplo, pelotero o toltero, como ya mencioné, o algo como doble matanza, para decir doble play. Pero bueno, también con Lyft hay términos que nosotros tenemos la oportunidad de traducir por la primera vez. Entonces, nosotros tenemos la opción, la oportunidad de crear este término por la primera vez. Pero con béisbol es un poco diferente, porque la mayoría de los términos ya existen traducidas o no traducidas, dependiendo en la persona que está hablando. En cada país, obviamente, tiene sus propios términos, pero creo que hay un vocabulario, un léxico para béisbol que es más global. Entonces, esas son las palabras que se escogen para utilizar en la app de la MLB. Y sí, cosas como base por bolas, se puede decir base por bolas, se puede decir pasaporte, se puede decir transferencia, y la diversidad de términos para, que se usa para el mismo término es muy interesante, y creo que es algo que una persona que está aprendiendo español, o una persona que habla español como yo, pero no como nativo, es algo que siempre estoy aprendiendo, siempre estoy tratando de espigar, de agarrar términos nuevos para añadir a mi vocabulario. Y sí, no, es fascinante la diversidad de términos en español para béisbol.
No, see, no, I think it's fantastic. And I think it's just, even if you don't speak Spanish, just kind of hearing, the breakdown and being able to kind of figure out what you're saying enough, hearing Spanish enough, I think you start to pick up little things. Unfortunately, I can't speak it, but I feel like I understood the good majority of what you were saying. But no, I kind of, one of the things I thought too would be kind of fun, just kind of as we kind of like wrap things up. I think this is just a fun, awesome podcast, and I super appreciate you being on this, especially to talk this great thing and the connection between baseball and user friendliness and communications. But I thought, what is probably your best memory from a Dodgers situation? Whether it's this year or years previous. And then, of course, I'll share mine as well with the Cubs. And then I would love to hear your predictions for the wonderful World Series ahead of us.
Yeah. Let me pick.
And if you want to translate the question, I guess that would be kind of fun as well.
Sure. Bueno, la pregunta que me hizo Michael es, ¿cuál es la memoria más importante, o la mejor memoria que tengo en mi experiencia en un partido de los Dodgers? So I'll say it in English, and then I'll do it in Spanish. I'm going to choose two, because one was a Dodger win and the other was a Dodger loss. But they're still great memories. One was 2009 NLCS. I had just gotten this little camera recording thing. This was right before smartphones were really a thing. And I had this little video recording thing. And I was taking a video of Manny Ramirez. Wonderful, amazing baseball player, larger than life personality, but he was playing for the Dodgers at the time. And this was the NLCS against the Phillies. I think this was either game 3 or game 4. I don't remember. But anyway, so I started recording because Manny is always doing something fun. And I remember I got him just absolutely hitting a massive home run, just a huge, no doubter. And I still have the video. I have it on Facebook. I posted it, and it still comes up every October, and reminds me of that amazing moment. They ended up losing the game, but getting that moment on video and reliving it, every so often was pretty amazing. And then the other one was 2018 World Series, that 18 inning game. I don't know if you remember that one, where they just kept going into the night.
Yes.
Beer sales had stopped after the 7th inning. So around the 11th or 12th, was starting to feel like, oh, how long is this going to go on? But we stayed the whole time. We waited until the 18th inning.
Oh, yeah. It was against Boston Red Sox, right?
Against Boston, and watched Max Muncy walk it off in the bottom of the 18th. So that was a pretty incredible moment. So Y bueno, para describirlo en español, regresamos a la liga, la serie de campeonato de la Liga Nacional en 2009. Estaba viendo el partido y vino al bat Manny Ramírez, un pelotero fantástico, grandísimo, con una personalidad muy grande, quizá más grande que su bate. Y estaba grabando con un dispositivo que acaba de conseguir. Eso fue un poco antes que los smartphones han permanecido, han infiltrado a la sociedad en la manera en que están tan prevalente hoy. Y sí, estaba grabando el Manny Ramírez mientras estaba al bat y pegó jonrón, un cuadrangular. Y el estadio rompió en aplauso y la afición, los aficionados estaban poniéndose loco, completamente loco, y fue una locura y fue bien divertido a ver Manny pegar un home run. Desafortunadamente perdieron el partido, pero esta experiencia fue grandísimo. Y la otra memoria que tengo es en 2018, en la Serie Mundial contra los Medias Rojas de Boston. Había un partido que duró 18 entradas, 18 episodios, que es exactamente 2 partidos en vez de 1. Las tiendas dejaron de vender la cerveza en la séptima entrada, entonces más o menos en la undécimo o duodécimo entrada, nosotros sentimos un poco, bueno, ¿cuánto más va a durar este partido? Pero por fin, en la entrada 18, pegó un jonrón a Max Muncy y me acuerdo muy bien porque nosotros quedamos en nuestros asientos hasta el final como un buen fanático y sí, esto también es una memoria que siempre me va que siempre va a quedar conmigo.
It always sounds like the Spanish has so much more color to it.
I agree.
No, it did. I heard some great adjectives and verbs there. So, yeah, no, my fondest memory from Chicago Cubs, I've got probably two. I've got many, but two that really strike me, and I'll just say them quickly because otherwise I could talk about 2016 for a good 4 hours here. But in 2016, I was fortunate enough to go to the NLCS game where the Cubs I'm sorry, it was it wasn't the NLC, it wasn't the championship series, it was the division series against the St. Louis Cardinals, and got to see them clinch at Wrigley Field to beat the St. Louis Cardinals in 2015, actually, to advance to the NLCS for the first time since 2003. So that was exceptional because there was that huge Kyle Schwarber home run where he hit this majestic home run that went over one of the scoreboards, landed on the other side. It was actually a Budweiser sign, and it landed on the other side, and it literally sat there, and it stayed there for like until the next year or the year after. It might even still be up there, I'm not sure. I know for a little while they had like a glass case around it. So that home run I will always remember, just because the minute it was hit, everybody knew it was gone. Went straight out, pulled to he's actually a lefty, so he didn't pull the ball. He wait, am I losing my mind? He didn't pull the ball because it went to right field. So I know it went over the Budweiser sign. But anyways, it was amazing. And then I'd say the other big memory I was thinking about the other day was back in 1998, Harry Carey had just passed away, who was the big Cubs announcer for television. And he had just passed away, and the Cubs made it just luckily to the wild card or game to get into the wild card against San Francisco Giants, that your team's rival. So I'm sure you didn't mind this, but the Cubs beat the Giants at Wrigley Field, and I just remember, how loud the stadium was that day, and there was like this huge balloon of Harry Carey that was very much like the ghost of Harry Carey overlooking the Cubs. So it was a fantastic memory, and I was there with my father as well. So But those are probably my two favorite memories. And I didn't even include the World Series win, which God knows we waited 108 years. So, so I don't know how you want to translate that. And then we can finally end this with our quick World Series predictions. But you can, of course, get the Cliff Notes version.
Sure. Bueno, las mejores memorias vienen de la serie de campeonato. When was the Schwarber home run?
That was 2015, actually.
En 2015, un home run de Kyle Schwarber que superó, que voló sobre la pared en el jardín y pegó un cartero o se me olvidó exactamente cómo decir eso, un gran cartel de Budweiser y la pelota quedó allá por un largo rato. Quizá la pelota todavía está allá y creo que ponieron una cajita de vidrio para proteger la pelota, para asegurar que nadie lo agarre. Y la otra memoria que mencionó Michael es en 1998, en la serie de campeonato de la Liga Nacional contra los Gigantes de San Francisco, los rivales de mis queridos Dodgers de Los Ángeles. Ganaron contra los Gigantes y eso fue una serie tan emocionante. Y lo que recuerda Michael es el nivel del volumen de los gritos de la afición, de los fanáticos, y la emoción que mostró todos los aficionados de los Cachorros de Chicago. I don't know if you knew that, but like some baseball teams have a translation, like they actually will translate it. So the Cubs are los Cachorros de Chicago. So you'll hear people say Chicago Cubs, but I usually like to translate the terms, like Red Sox, los Medias Rojas, White Sox, los Medios Blancos, Giants, los Gigantes. You could do either one because
you've inspired me to look for some kind of jersey or something where it's got the actual written Cubs in Spanish. That would be awesome.
That would, yeah. I don't know if that exists. I'd have to imagine. I mean, as you know, there's a huge Latino population in Chicago, and they do Hispanic Heritage Night, I know, across MLB. And like the Giants will have Gigantes across their front. So maybe the Cubs have something similar where it says Cachorros.
I love that. No, that's great. And so finally, we bring our conclusion to what are your predictions in the World Series as far as how many games. I know we could talk about this for another hour, the breakdown, and you and I could go through probably the analysis of players and pitching matchups and everything else. But it would be great to hear any kind of predictions as far as heroes, MVPs, all of that. But I know Kershaw is pitching tonight as well, and then he's faced against what's the Tampa Bay's pitcher's name again? I'm trying to remember his. I
want to say it's Wheeler.
Wheeler. No, it's Glass now. No, it's Tyler Glass now. Yes.
Yeah. So here we go again. Dodgers have made it to the World Series 3 of the last 4 seasons now. Kershaw, by the numbers, has not performed as well as he has in the regular season, but I think there's a case to be made. Number one, with his tenure, absolutely deserves to start in Game 1 without a doubt. So I'm really glad he's getting the ball. 2, I think the season is different in the fact that they only played 60 games, so he didn't get nearly as many starts. So I think he's fresher if you think about it. He, in the season where he played the whole time, he's 30 some starts. By the time they get to the World Series, he's probably made almost 40 starts and maybe might be running out of gas because he's not a spring chicken. But I do think that he
not a spring chicken in baseball, by the way, to everybody out
right,
there is like, over 30.
right.
So go ahead.
It's true. True. So yeah, I think there's a good chance that he's gonna perform well. I think a lot of the Rays players haven't seen Kershaw, because the thing that's tough about being a pitcher, the more you pitch, the more people get a chance to see you. I mean, because Kershaw's been in the league so long, how much tape is on Kershaw? Like, he's been analyzed. There's a lot of ways that you can, a pitching coach can look at how he throws and really try and get an edge on him. So I think it'll be up to him to make adjustments. But I don't think the Dodgers and the Rays played in the regular season.
No.
So this matchup, they haven't seen Kershaw, at least this year. So I think that'll be an advantage for him. Another thing that I think is interesting that we didn't talk about, but the Rays payroll is basically the same
I did see that.
As Kershaw and Mookie Betts' salaries alone.
Yeah, I saw that. I actually saw that article this morning. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just think that goes to show you that it doesn't always matter about how much your payroll is. What I do think is interesting, I don't know if you saw this, Andrew Friedman, who's the president of baseball operations for the Dodgers, he came up in the Rays organization. So he knows both of these franchises really well, and I actually think that's going to work in the favor of the Dodgers, because he knows how they operate. He knows a lot of those players. So I think it'll be more.
How many games? How many games do you think?
Yeah. So my prediction, I will say Dodgers. I will definitely say Dodgers. Vegas agrees with me. Vegas has them -180, which means they're almost 2-1 favorites. I will say, I think the Rays pitching is very good. I think they're young. So if they can step up and not get nervous, this is only the second time the franchise has made it to the World Series. I think they can put forward a couple of good performances. I think they can take a couple of games. So I'm going to say Dodgers in 6.
Yeah, I was gonna predict the same, Dodgers in 6. So I agree with you. I think that it'll be interesting tonight. I'm pulling for Kershaw just because, he has been such a great pitcher for a very long time, and he's not had the easiest postseason kind of experience at times. But one of the things I like is he doesn't seem to be shaken by it. So, despite his challenges in the playoffs at times. So, yeah, no, I think it'll be a really fun series. The only thing that is unpredictable, as we've talked about with baseball, is yes, payroll plays a part, but sometimes teams that are, loose and young and are a little dangerous. And that's why Tampa is definitely, I think, a dangerous team for that reason. But that's where the Dodgers also are very fortunate to have money plus youth coming through their pipeline constantly. So I think that, it'll be a very fun series to watch. And I actually plan on putting work down and trying to pay attention to a full game for the World Series tonight. So yeah, that is, Zach, I really, really appreciate you being here. Maybe you just wanted to quickly say in Spanish what our final kind of predictions were for the World Series. And then we will wrap it up. But thanks so much for being a guest on this X-Cultural, this first of hopefully other podcasts that kind of cross over into other kind of areas that extend into global business and culture. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, pues para hablar sobre nuestras predicciones para la Serie Mundial, primero que nada, queremos decir que los dos equipos son buenísimos, desde su rotación de lanzamiento hasta su alineación de bateo. Los dos tienen mucho talento, mucho poder, y creo que va a ser una serie muy contestada, que los dos equipos tienen una oportunidad de ganar, pero Michael y yo estamos de acuerdo que creemos que los Dodgers van a ganar en 6 partidos. 6 partidos van a ganar los Dodgers, la Serie Mundial. La rotación de lanzamiento de los Rays es muy bueno, pero creo que la alineación de bateo de los Dodgers es mejor y puede superar el talento que tiene los lanzadores de los Rays. Para hablar un poco sobre Clayton Kershaw, que está comenzando, que está abriendo el primer partido hoy. Ha tenido sus problemas en el pasado en términos de su rendimiento en los playoffs, pero por supuesto merece la oportunidad de rectificar, de resolver estos problemas y abrir este primer partido. Y creo que hay una diferencia en esta temporada. Primero que nada, solo jugamos 60 partidos y en otras temporadas se juega 162 partidos y creo que debido a que no es un pelotero joven, creo que en el pasado puede cansar o puede estar cansado en términos de su fuerza, su estamina. Pero creo que debido a que no ha jugado tantos juegos aquí en la Serie Mundial, va a tener la fuerza para superar los demonios que ha tenido en el pasado y tener una buena serie. Y finalmente quiero decir que ganen los Dodgers.
Awesome. Yeah. And finally, I'll just end it with something I kind of failed to say is that this X-Cultural webcast is brought to you and powered by Vistatec, a global content solutions provider to many and most of the most iconic and innovative brands out there in the universe. So thanks so much, Zach, once again. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm Michael Asquith, and thank you so much. Cheers, everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Michael. I really had a good time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sam.
Oh, yeah. Yo, let's do this. Got picture homie rolling.